On my birthday, Maya suddenly announced she was getting married. She shoved my confession gift back into my hands with a cold look. Leo, I've always seen you as a younger brother. Please don't make this difficult for us. You mentioned wanting to study abroad in London, right? I've already finished the paperwork. You leave at the end of the month. I accepted everything in silence. Before I left, I erased every trace of my existence from her life. Years later, as I was exchanging rings with my new bride, Maya stormed the stage in a mess. With bloodshot eyes, she grabbed my arm and begged to know one thing. She wanted to know if my promise to marry her still counted. At my birthday party, Maya brought home a fiancé she had been dating for barely 2 months. After we cut the cake, she reached out to wipe a bit of frosting from the corner of my mouth. She smiled at me, though it didn't reach her eyes. So, what did you wish for this year? I kept my head down, focused on my plate. It took me a long time to whisper a response. The same thing as always. The atmosphere turned icy the moment those words left my lips. Maya's smile vanished. She stood up straight and placed the largest slice of cake in front of her fiancé Hudson. Then, she cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. Hudson and I have set our wedding date for early next month. Leo, if you keep acting like this, I'll have to find a different best man. She picked up a strawberry and held it to my lips, her voice dropping to a warning tone. You're an adult now. Stop acting so foolish. I remembered her saying something similar 4 years ago. Back then, she was dating a senior from her department at the university. They had been together for a year, but I ruined everything by throwing a tantrum at my birthday party. Afterward, Maya found me at a bus stop, shivering in the pouring rain after I ran away from home. She didn't scold me. Instead, she dried my hair and teased me gently. You've always been good at spotting the bad ones. If you don't like him, I'll just break up with him. My face had flushed as I stripped off my wet clothes. I couldn't stop myself from kissing her cheek. She didn't push me away. She just tapped my nose. You're still such a child. That was the first time I confessed to her. The rain was so loud that it almost drowned out my voice. She tilted her head, giving me a sweet, lingering look. When you can stand on your own and help our parents run the family business, I'll marry you. How does that sound? I clung to that promise. I stopped questioning her love life. I was naive enough to think she would dump any guy for me if I just asked. Maya, I don't like him. If you marry him, I'll... Before I could finish, Maya slammed a medical report onto the table. Congratulations, Leo. You're going to be an uncle. Do you like the birthday present I got you? Hudson looked ecstatic. He pressed his hand against Maya's belly, his voice trembling with excitement. Watching them, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. You liar. You promised you'd marry me. Why are you with someone like him? Maya didn't even flinch at my outburst. She pulled Hudson closer and glared at me with pure disgust. Because I love him. Do I need any other reason? Leo, if you weren't the child my parents took in, I would have slapped you across the face by now. In a fit of rage, I shoved the cake off the table. I started smashing the plates and glasses, but Maya didn't move. She watched me like I was a puppy having a tantrum over a toy. Her cold indifference finally made me stop. When I dated that girl in my class, you went crazy. You didn't speak to me for days. Are you really going to tell me you never felt anything for me? I collapsed onto the floor, covered in sticky frosting and broken glass. I looked at her, searching for one last spark of hope. Leo, I didn't care about your little girlfriend. But dating someone from a trashy family with failing grades? That was unacceptable. My father blamed me for not raising you right. That's why I was angry. Don't get it twisted. I opened my mouth to argue, but she cut me off with a sharp slap to the face. My parents should have never adopted you. You're nothing but a headache. The birthday party ended in the most humiliating way possible. Maya cleared out her room and took down every photo of us. She even gathered all the gifts I had ever given her and had them burned in the backyard. Leo, I'll have the butler send you a monthly allowance. Don't contact me unless it's an emergency. I'm busy. I don't have time to play house with you anymore. This time, I didn't say a word. I knew that no matter how much I fought, Maya wouldn't change her mind. A few days later, I was back at my dorm, packing my things in silence. Suddenly, a plastic bin hit me in the back of the head. I looked up to see a group of guys from the neighboring dorm standing in the doorway. Look at the little prince packing. Going home to get married, are we? I tried to ignore them, but the taunts didn't stop. I saw Maya's post on Instagram. She's marrying the heir to the Vance empire. What does that have to do with Leo? Man, imagine being an adopted stray and dreaming of marrying your sister just to steal the family company. Talk about a gold digger. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking. There it was. Maya had pinned her engagement announcement at the top of her profile. To ensure the wedding went smoothly, she had moved the date back a week. It was the exact same day I was scheduled to fly out of the country. Everyone knows the Sterlings only kept him around to be Maya's errand boy. He actually thought he'd inherit half the company. It's pathetic. A total bottom feeder trying to win the lottery. The words stung, mostly because they were true. I had been delusional. I thought I mattered to her. I didn't realize that her favoritism was just pity. My parents had been close friends with the Sterlings before they died in a car accident. That crash left me an orphan, and the Sterlings took me in. Maya was 3 years older and far more sophisticated. It was her constant care that made me fall for her in the first place. When I was 10, I told her parents I was going to marry her one day. They laughed, and Maya's face turned bright red. But she took me seriously back then. Leo, if you want to marry me, you have to study hard and become a man of character. If you do, I'll say yes. I had held on to that childhood promise for 10 long years. Suddenly, I heard one of the guys whisper something else. But honestly, Maya is such a tease. I heard she's been through a dozen guys in the last few years. Now she's knocked up. She's basically for the streets. If she's that easy, maybe I should have had a turn. I didn't let him finish. Rage exploded in my chest. I lunged at him, my fist connecting hard with his jaw. I felt his nose snap. Blood sprayed across the floor as he screamed in pain. You piece of trash. I grabbed a wooden stool, ready to smash it over his head. But then something heavy hit the back of my skull. Everything went black. I woke up in the campus infirmary with bruises all over my body. My face was a mess of cuts and swelling. The other guy wasn't doing much better, broken nose and a fractured arm. Maya arrived at the school within 30 minutes of getting the call. She didn't even ask if I was okay. She just started screaming. I turned my back for 1 second and you pull this crap? I told you to stop causing me trouble. Why can't you just listen for once? She didn't care about my side of the story. Despite my injuries, she dragged me out of bed and into the hallway where the other student was waiting. She demanded that I apologize. The guy couldn't even look me in the eye, but he still acted like a victim. Leo, I just said a few things about you and your sister. You didn't have to go psycho on me. My basketball season is over because of this. I'm suing you for everything you've got. Seeing his smug, lying face made my blood boil all over again. You want to keep talking? I'll break your other arm right now. He cowed back, whimpering like a kicked dog. Before I could move, Maya's hand cracked across my face. If Hudson hadn't been there to hold her back, she probably would have hit me again. Get on your knees. If you don't apologize right now, I'm telling my parents to disown you. Don't you dare drag the Sterling name through the mud because of your ego. She gave me a violent shove. Weak and dizzy, I lost my balance and crashed to my knees on the hard floor. In front of everyone. In that moment, I didn't just lose my dignity. Every shred of love and hope I had for her shattered into dust. I spent 2 days recovering before I was cleared to leave. After finishing my withdrawal paperwork and moving out of the dorms, Hudson made a suggestion. He wanted us all to have one last dinner together. Maya was against it, but she eventually gave in to his nagging. At the restaurant, Maya didn't say a word. She just picked at a small steak. 10 minutes passed, and she hadn't even swallowed a bite. The silence was suffocating until Hudson finally spoke up. Leo, about what happened at school. Were those guys messing with you first? Maya told me you were always such a good kid. There must have been some kind of misunderstanding. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. When she was forcing me to kneel in that hallway, he hadn't said a word. Now he wanted to play the peacemaker? Whatever. It doesn't matter now. I already got on my knees like a dog. You can't take that back. I pushed a pile of peas to the side of my plate. I hated peas. Maya used to know that. She used to call the chef ahead of time to make sure they were never on my plate. The only reason you aren't in a jail cell is because that boy decided not to press charges, Maya snapped. You should be grateful, Leo. But instead you're acting like a brat. I looked at her, seeing a stranger in the face of the woman I loved. She was judging me without even knowing the truth. I'm the ungrateful one? Do you even know why I fought them? It was because I slammed my fork down, but the words died in my throat. The things they said about her were too disgusting to repeat. Enough. We're here as a family. Let's not ruin the night with more fighting, Hudson interrupted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an elegant envelope. Actually, I wanted to give you this. Maya only postponed the wedding because she was mad at you. I talked her out of it. Leo, I want your blessing. I want you to be my best man. His tone was so kind that I felt my guard drop slightly. I had always been hostile toward the men Maya dated. Most of them were players or after her money. I took the invitation, feeling a heavy weight in my chest. Halfway through the meal, Maya felt unwell and went to the restroom. Hudson's phone rang, and he stepped away to take the call. The air in the restaurant felt thin. I needed to move. I walked toward the hallway to get some air. As I rounded the corner, I saw Hudson. But he wasn't alone. He was pinned against the wall, making out with another woman. Watching them, I lost all control. I rushed forward and grabbed Hudson by the collar. The woman must have been the one who called him. You pig. You're supposed to marry Maya. She's carrying your child, and you're here with this tramp. Now that his secret was out, Hudson stopped acting nice. You're just a dog the Sterlings picked up off the street. Who do you think you're talking to? Maya is used goods. If she didn't have a massive trust fund, I wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole. But then his face shifted. He caught a glimpse of something behind me. Suddenly, he threw himself onto the floor, acting like I had shoved him. Leo, if you hate me, just say it. Why do you have to make up lies like this? I realized too late what he was doing. I turned around to see Maya running toward us. She pushed past me and helped Hudson to his feet. She started brushing the dust off his suit, looking at him with pure concern. Leo, I leave for 2 minutes and you're attacking him again. Before I could speak, Hudson cut in. My secretary just called to have me sign some urgent papers. Leo must have misunderstood. He groaned, faking a grimace of pain. Maya, don't be mad. It's not his fault. Stop defending him. He knows exactly what he's doing. Maya screamed. She walked up to me and spat right in my face. I am done with you, Leo. My patience is gone. I stood there, paralyzed. The storm inside me finally went quiet. The secretary stepped forward, wiping fake tears from her eyes. Ma'am, your brother just started calling me names. He said I was a homewrecker, but I was just delivering files. She held up a folder. Maya's eyes flickered with rage. She took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. Arthur? Have the legal team draft a severance agreement. I want to legally disown Leo by the end of the day. I kept hoping it was just a threat until I saw the actual paperwork. The words were cold and final. I'll explain things to our parents later, she said. I'm having accounting transfer enough money to your account to cover 5 years in London. After that, you're on your own. Maya tapped her fingers on the desk, looking like she couldn't wait for me to leave. I thought I would break down. I thought I would beg her to keep me, just like I did when I was a kid standing in the morgue over my parents' bodies. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow peace. Do you even realize what you did wrong, Leo? She looked at me like a judge delivering a sentence. I nodded slowly. I shouldn't have loved you, and I shouldn't have expected you to love me back. For a split second, Maya looked shocked. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words seemed to get stuck. I picked up the pen and signed my name on the bottom right corner. I pressed my thumb onto the ink pad and left a print. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even blink. Maya, who had been so composed, suddenly looked restless. Leo, think carefully. I'm not playing games. Once this is stamped, you have no connection to this family. I am not your sister. I didn't answer. I reached into my shirt and pulled off a necklace. I placed the silver pendant on her desk. Her parents had given it to me the day I was adopted. It was my symbol of belonging. Maya, I hope you have a nice wedding. Goodbye. I walked out of her office without looking back. I went home and packed everything I owned in 30 minutes. We had lived together for 10 years. The house was full of memories. I told the maids to box up every photo and memento of us. And just like Maya had done to my gifts, I watched them all burn in the incinerator. The flight from Capital Airport to Heathrow was 11 hours and 40 minutes. I didn't sleep for a single second. I sat by the oval window, watching the endless blanket of clouds turn from amber to indigo as the jet engines hummed a steady, monotonous drone. In my lap sat a small leather-bound notebook, the only thing I hadn't burned. It contained no photos of Maya, no letters, no dried flowers from the Sterling estate. It contained only bank routing numbers, my admission letter to the London School of Economics, and a list of cheap studio apartments in Bloomsbury. The moment the plane wheels slammed onto the wet tarmac of Heathrow, I took out my phone. I uninstalled WeChat. I deactivated the Instagram account I had used for 6 years to follow Maya's every move. I removed the SIM card she had paid for, snapped it in half between my thumb and forefinger, and dropped the blue plastic sliver into a trash receptacle at Terminal 2 Customs. When I stepped out into the crisp, drizzling London air, my breath bloomed into white mist. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't an adopted stray waiting for a treat. I wasn't an errand boy. I wasn't a convenient scapegoat. I was nobody. And it felt magnificent. The first 6 months were a blur of cold rain, black coffee and endless library stacks. Maya's accounting department had transferred £50,000 into a fresh UK account, the 5-year allowance she had mentioned during our final cold severance agreement. I didn't touch a single penny of it. Instead, I took a job as a night shift clerk at a newsstand near Russell Square, earning £7 an hour stocking newspapers and selling cigarettes to tired cab drivers. I worked until 3 in the morning, slept for 4 hours in a basement room that smelled of damp wool, and attended my lectures at 8. Every month on the 1st, I went to the Barclays branch on Tottenham Court Road and instructed the teller to wire £10,000 back to the Sterling Corporation's main account, tagged simply as Ref, returned funds/L. Myers. By the 5th month, the entire $50,000 was gone from my UK account. I owed her nothing. It was during my 2nd year at university that I met Clara. She was an architectural restoration student from Edinburgh, quiet, sharp-witted, with dark red hair and eyes the color of rain-soaked heather. We met in a small, second-hand bookstore off Charing Cross Road, when we both reached for the same worn copy of Ruskin's The Stones of Venice. She didn't know the Sterlings. She didn't know about the car crash that killed my birth parents, nor did she know about the girl who had forced me to my knees in a hospital hallway to protect a lying fiancé. When I told her my story months later over hot tea in her small apartment, she didn't look at me with pity. She didn't tap my nose and call me a child. She reached across the wooden table, took my calloused hand, and held it with a firm, grounded warmth. "You survived a parasite, Leo," she said softly, her voice steady and unyielding. "Now you have to let yourself live." With Clara, love wasn't a game of obedience. It wasn't about earning points or passing arbitrary tests. It was simple, quiet, and solid as granite. Back in the capital, the autumn after my departure was bitter and dry. The Sterling estate felt strangely oversized. For weeks after the incinerator fire in the backyard, a faint smell of scorched paper and synthetic cloth lingered near the rose garden, though the servants had scrubbed the brickwork 3 times. Maya sat at the dining table, her laptop open, reviewing the quarterly financial statements for the Sterling Corporation's shipping division. Across from her sat Hudson Vance, wearing a silk robe she had bought him for his birthday. He was lounging on the leather sofa, flicking through his phone with a lazy smile. "Maya, babe," Hudson drawled, not looking up. "My father's firm needs a small capital bridge for the new port project in the West. About 12 million. Can you have your finance chief sign off on the wire tomorrow?" Maya's pen paused over the paper. She didn't lift her head. 12 million is outside the secondary approval threshold, Hudson, she said, her voice dry. "The board needs to review it." "The board?" Hudson scoffed, tossing his phone onto the cushion. "We're getting married in 3 weeks, Maya. My family's business is your business. Besides, your dad promised my father we'd merge the logistics assets after the wedding." Maya rubbed her temples. Her head had been aching for days. Morning sickness had been brutal, leaving her pale and exhausted before 9 in the morning. "Where is the coffee?" she muttered, glancing toward the kitchen door. "You told the butler to stop making it because of the pregnancy, remember?" Hudson said casually. He stood up, stretching. "Listen, I'm heading out for a bit. Got a meeting with the port authorities." "At 8 in the evening?" Maya frowned, finally looking up. "Government officials like late dinners, babe. You know how it is." He leaned down, kissed her cheek hastily, and walked toward the foyer. As he pulled his coat off the rack, a small white slip of paper fell from his pocket, fluttering down onto the parquet floor near the archway. Maya watched him leave, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him. She stood up slowly, her stomach turning with a faint, uneasy nausea. She walked over and picked up the paper. It was a receipt from an upscale jewelry boutique on Central Avenue. 1 CT oval diamond solitaire engagement ring, $14,500. Payment method corporate. Amex Hudson Vance. Boutique delivery address, Suite 402, St. Regis Residences. Maya froze. The engagement ring Hudson had given her 2 months ago was an antique family heirloom from his mother. He hadn't bought a new ring. And Suite 402, at the St. Regis, was the apartment the Sterling Corporation rented. 4 top-tier visiting executives, the exact residence currently assigned to Hudson's personal secretary, Chloe. Maya's blood ran cold. She reached for her phone, her fingers suddenly numb, and dialed Arthur, the head of Sterling Corporation's legal team. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I need you to pull the expense reports for Hudson Vance's corporate card over the last 4 months. And pull the security footage from the West Wing hallway of the restaurant, from the night of the dinner with Leo." The truth did not arrive in a dramatic explosion. It arrived in a neat, white paper folder delivered to Maya's office at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Inside were 30 pages of bank statements, hotel logs, and high-definition security stills. Hudson hadn't just been cheating with his secretary. He had been sleeping with 3 different women across the city, using Sterling corporate accounts to pay for luxury apartments, leases, and jewelry. Worse still, the audit revealed that the Vance empire was a hollowed-out shell. Hudson's father was heavily in debt to offshore lenders, and the marriage to Maya was a calculated maneuver to absorb Sterling assets before the bankruptcy courts moved in. And then there was the video footage from the restaurant hallway. Maya sat in her high-backed leather chair, staring at the screen of her desktop monitor. The video was silent, but the story was brutally clear. She watched Hudson step out of the dining corridor, catch Chloe by the waist, and press her against the wall near the restrooms, his hand sliding under her skirt. She watched Leo round the corner. She saw Leo's posture ignite with protective fury. She saw Leo grab Hudson by the collar, yelling at him. And then she saw Hudson glance over Leo's shoulder, spotting Maya approaching in the distance, and deliberately throw himself to the floor, rolling onto his back, kicking his legs, putting on a pathetic sniveling display of terror. Maya watched her own on-screen reflection enter the frame. She saw herself push Leo away. She saw herself brush the dust off Hudson's suit. She saw herself spit right into Leo's face while Hudson hid behind his secretary, smirking quietly into his coat sleeve. Maya stared at the screen for 10 minutes after the video ended. She didn't cry. Her eyes felt dry, gritty, like they were filled with sand. She picked up her desk phone and called the head of security. "Have Hudson Vance's security clearance revoked immediately," she said, her voice dangerously flat. "Cancel all corporate cards under his name. File a formal fraud complaint with the district attorney's office. And tell Arthur to begin asset recovery proceedings against the Vance family." She hung up the phone. The office was deathly quiet. She walked out of her building, ignored her driver, and drove her own car back to the Sterling estate. She walked up the grand staircase to the 3rd floor, past her parents' old master suite, and stopped in front of the door at the far end of the hall. Leo's room. She pushed the door open. She expected to see his clothes hanging in the closet. She expected to see his messy desk covered in economics textbooks, his basketball shoes under the bed, the small silver-framed photo of the two of them at his high school graduation, sitting on the nightstand. The room was completely bare. The mattress was stripped down to the blue stripe ticking. The bookshelves were empty save for a layer of fine gray dust. The closet door swung open to reveal bare wooden hangers clicking softly in the draft. Even the curtains had been unhooked and removed. Maya's heart hammered violently against her ribs. She turned and ran downstairs, her heels clicking frantically against the marble. "Mrs. Gable," she screamed, her voice cracking as she reached the kitchen. "Mrs. Gable." The old housekeeper stepped out of the pantry, wiping her hands on her apron, her face solemn and unreadable. "Where are Leo's things?" Maya demanded, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. "Where did you put his clothes? The photo on his desk? His notebooks?" Mrs. Gable looked at Maya for a long, quiet moment. There was no warmth in the old woman's eyes, only a weary, heavy sadness. "Master Leo instructed us to box everything up the night he signed the papers." "Miss Maya," Mrs. Gable said quietly, "where are the boxes?" Maya grabbed the housekeeper's arm. "In the attic? The basement? Tell me." Mrs. Gable gently pulled her arm out of Maya's grip. "He took them to the backyard, Miss Maya. He carried them to the incinerator himself. He watched them burn until there was nothing left but gray ash. Just like you ordered him to do with his birthday gifts." Maya reeled back as if she had been slapped across the face. She stumbled out the back door into the cold autumn air, running across the manicured lawn to the brick incinerator near the edge of the woods. She fell to her knees in the wet dirt, reaching her bare hands into the cold soot inside the metal grate. Soot covered her knuckles, smearing across her expensive ivory blouse. She dug frantically through the cold ash, her fingers clawing at the burnt debris, searching for a zipper, a piece of glass, a fragment of paper, anything. There was nothing. He had erased himself. He had left her with a clean, empty room and an empty house. Maya sat in the dirt, clutching her hands to her chest, and let out a broken, ragged scream that echoed through the quiet, empty trees. The downfall of the Vance family was swift and merciless. Within 3 months, Hudson's father was indicted for securities fraud and Hudson himself was named in a civil suit brought by the Sterling legal team to recover $4 million in misappropriated corporate funds. Faced with prison time and complete ruin, Hudson tried to see Maya 3 times. The first time, she had security throw him out of the lobby. The second time, she watched from her office window as the police escorted him off the property in handcuffs. The pregnancy was a ghost. A month after Leo left, a specialist confirmed that Maya's missed period and sickness weren't due to a child, but severe hormonal stress and an ovarian cyst caused by chronic exhaustion. There was no baby. There was no legacy. There was only the hollow ache in her lower abdomen that refused to go away. Maya threw herself into work with a terrifying, obsessive ferocity. She worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. She restructured the entire shipping division, expanded into European logistics, and fired anyone who showed the slightest hint of incompetence. Her parents, returning from their long retirement stay in Europe, were horrified by what had transpired. When her father learned that Maya had forced Leo to sign disownment papers and stand on his knees in a hospital hallway, the old man collapsed into his armchair, his face turning gray. "You threw him away?" her father whispered, his voice trembling with disgust. "The boy whose parents died saving our family's early supply line? You humiliated him for a con man." "Dad, I didn't know." "Get out of my sight," her father said, turning his back on her. "You are not a guardian, Maya. You are a tyrant." Maya left the house that night and moved into a cold, minimalist penthouse in the The city center. She couldn't sleep in the dark anymore. She left every light in the penthouse on, night after night, staring at her phone. She tried to call Leo's old number every evening at 10 p.m. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again. She hired private investigators, 3 different agencies over 2 years. Find him, she told them, tossing stacks of $100 bills onto her desk. I don't care how much it costs. Find where he lives, where he works, what he eats. Find him. The first agency found nothing. Leo had vanished into the dense, anonymous maze of London without using his adoptive name. The second agency tracked the returned wire transfers back to the Barclays branch on Tottenham Court Road, but the account had been closed immediately after the final installment was paid. It wasn't until 4 years after his departure that the third investigator brought a thin blue folder to her penthouse. Maya opened it with hands that shook so violently she almost dropped the papers. Inside was a single photograph, taken with a long-distance lens outside an elegant Georgian townhouse in Kensington, London. Leo was standing on the stone front steps. He was taller now, his shoulders broader, wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit. His face had lost its boyish softness. His jawline was hard, refined and confident. He was smiling, a genuine, radiant smile that reached his eyes. Beside him stood a woman with dark red hair, holding his hand, laughing as she straightened his silk tie. Below the photo was a printed clipping from the London Evening Standard. Engagement announcement. Mr. Leo Myers, senior partner at Vanguard Capital, London, to Miss Clara Oswald, senior director at Royal Institute of British Architects. Wedding ceremony to be held at St. Jude's Chapel, Mayfair on October 14th. Maya stared at the date at the bottom of the clipping. October 14th. That was 3 days away. October in London was damp, heavy and cold. St. Jude's Chapel was a stunning 19th-century Gothic church with soaring stained glass windows situated on a quiet, tree-lined street in Mayfair. Inside, the pews were filled with light and warmth. String quartets played softly in the balcony, their melodies echoing against the vaulted stone ceilings. Friends, university professors, corporate partners, and Clara's family sat in neat rows, chatting warmly. I stood at the altar, adjusting the cuffs of my dark suit. My best man, a brilliant Scottish barrister named Callum, whom I had met during my second year at LSE, tapped my shoulder with a grin. Nervous, mate, he whispered. Not even a little bit, I said, smiling softly. And I meant it. My heart was steady. There was no fear in my chest, no ghosts haunting my mind. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the chapel swung open, and the organist shifted into the opening chords of the bridal processional. The guests stood up in unison, turning toward the aisle. Clara stepped into the light. She looked breathtaking in an ivory lace gown with a long sweeping train, her red hair woven with small white lilies, holding a bouquet of blue hydrangeas. Her eyes locked onto mine, warm, brilliant, and full of absolute trust. She took 3 steps down the aisle. Bang. The heavy side entrance of the chapel, the door leading from the street vestry, was violently kicked open. A wave of freezing rain and wind rushed into the sanctuary, rattling the brass candle holders. The string quartet stumbled to a halt in a discordant screech of bows. The guests gasped, turning toward the side aisle. A woman stumbled through the doorway. She was drenched from head to toe. Her expensive silk coat was stained with mud. Along the hem, her hair matted against her pale, sunken cheeks. Her high heels were missing one lift, causing her to limp awkwardly as she took a staggering step forward. Her eyes were bloodshot, wild, ringed with dark purplish circles of sleeplessness and exhaustion. It was Maya. She had flown 12 hours from Asia, landed at Heathrow 2 hours ago, and run through 4 blocks of London rain after her taxi got stuck in Mayfair traffic. The church ushers immediately moved to intercept her. Ma'am, you can't be in here. Get off me. Maya screamed, her voice hoarse, raspy, completely unhinged. She shoved an usher away with a burst of frantic strength. Her eyes locked onto the altar. Onto me. Leo. She breathed, a wet, choking sob breaking from her throat. Leo. The guests murmured in shock. Clara paused mid-step on the aisle, her brow furrowing, looking from Maya to me with calm concern rather than panic. Maya limped forward, dragging her mud-stained coat across the pristine carpet of the altar step. The security guards hired for the event stepped up to grab her arms, but I raised my hand slightly, stopping them. Maya stumbled up the 3 stone steps to the altar. She stood 5 feet away from me. Up close, she looked hollow, like a ghost that had been dragging heavy chains across the earth for years. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold them up. She reached out, her mud-stained fingers grasping my dark suit sleeve, clutching the fabric, as if she were drowning in a stormy sea. Leo. She sobbed, tears cutting clean, pale tracks through the grime on her face. Leo, I found you. I finally found you. I didn't pull my arm away immediately. I stood perfectly still, looking down at her. I felt no rage. I felt no surge of bitterness. I felt no desire to scream at her or demand an apology. I felt the exact same emotion I had felt when I dropped my silver pendant onto her desk 4 years ago, a cold, hollow pity for a stranger. Maya, I said quietly. My voice was smooth, deep, and steady. You shouldn't be here. Leo, please. She fell to her knees at my feet, her bloody, stockinged knees pressing into the stone floor, her hands desperately gripping my leg. She lifted her face, her bloodshot eyes staring up at me with raw, terrifying agony. I know what I did. She sobbed, her voice breaking into pitiful fragments. I know I was blind. I know Hudson was a monster. I threw him in prison, Leo. I destroyed his family. I burned everything. She tightened her grip on my knee, her body shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. You mentioned wanting to study in London. You said you'd marry me when you could stand on your own. She lifted a trembling hand, reaching for my jaw, her voice dropping to a desperate, begging whisper that echoed across the silent chapel. Leo, tell me, does your promise still count? Please tell me it still counts. The quiet inside St. Jude's Chapel was absolute. The guests sat frozen in their pews. The organist sat motionless. The rain beat, a steady, soft rhythm against the tall stained glass windows. I looked down at the woman kneeling at my feet. I remembered the 10-year-old boy who had stood in a cold morgue, holding her hand, begging her not to leave him. I remembered the teenager who had walked through the rain to buy her favorite pastries, only to be told he was just an adopted stray. I remembered the young man who had kneeled in a hospital hallway while she spat in his face to protect a lying parasite. I gently reached down. I grabbed Maya's wrists. Her skin was freezing, sticky with rain and sweat, and firmly lifted her hands off my leg. I stepped back, breaking her grip completely. Maya, I said softly, my eyes meeting hers without a single flicker of hesitation. You asked me if my promise still counts. Maya looked up at me, her mouth trembling, a faint, desperate spark of hope flaring in her bloodshot eyes. That promise was made by a child who thought love was something he had to earn by suffering, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent church. I stood on my own 4 years ago, Maya, and the very first thing I realized when I stood up was that you were the one holding me down. Maya's face drained of every remaining drop of color. She looked as if she had been struck by a physical blow. No, Leo, please. She whimpered, reaching out her hands again, but her fingers found only empty air. I turned my back on her. I walked 3 steps down the altar to where Clara stood. Clara looked at me, her green eyes clear, calm, and filled with a deep, unwavering understanding. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She simply smiled softly and slipped her hand into mine. I turned back to face the altar, holding Clara's hand tightly. Guards, I said calmly to the security personnel standing by the side entrance. Please escort Miss Sterling out. She is interrupting our ceremony. No. Leo. No. Maya shrieked as the 2 burly guards stepped forward firmly, gripping her under her arms and lifting her off the floor. Leo, look at me. Please. I love you. I've always loved you. Don't do this to me. She thrashed, her missing heel kicking against the stone floor, her pristine coat dragging through the dust as the guards pulled her backward down the side aisle. Leo, please. Just one look. Leo. Her screams echoed against the tall stone arches, sharp and frantic, until the heavy mahogany doors slammed shut, cutting off her voice into the cold London rain. Inside the chapel, a quiet sigh of relief passed through the congregation. Callum stepped forward, straightening his lapels, and gave the organist a sharp nod. The music swelled once more, rich, warm, and triumphant, filling every corner of the vast, beautiful space. Clara turned to me, her fingers entwining with mine. Are you okay? She whispered. I looked at her warm red hair, her steady eyes, her gentle smile, and felt a deep, unshakable peace settle into my chest. I've never been better, I whispered back. The minister stepped forward, opening his heavy velvet book. Dearly beloved, his voice boomed warmly through the sanctuary. We are gathered here today to unite these 2 lives in holy matrimony. Outside, on the wet pavement of Mayfair, Maya sat on the cold curb in the pouring rain. Security guards stood 10 feet away, watching her coldly to ensure she didn't attempt to enter again. The heavy sound of the organ music drifted through the thick stone walls of the chapel, carrying the joyous applause of the guests as the minister pronounced us husband and wife. Maya sat in the mud, clutching her wet coat around her shivering shoulders, staring at her bare, ringless left hand. She pulled her knees to her chest and wept, alone in the dark, rainy city, listening to the celebration of the life she had thrown away, knowing that no matter how long she waited, no matter how much she begged, The boy who used to worship her was never, ever coming back.